Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Jess.
Hello, world.
And Alex.
Happy New Year.
Oh, well, thanks for that greeting.
It's our first one.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't even realize that. We've taken a little break, so welcome back. And we have a very special guest with us today. His name is Nathan. Nathan, thanks for being here.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
He just stole
There
it from you. He stole your greeting.
That's okay.
Alex has this habit of just coming up with some random greeting every episode, so that you're fitting right in.
Yep.
We're kicking off a series of episodes today about body image, health, diets, all the things you would expect us to be talking about on January of the new year. But Nathan, you tell us a little bit about yourself. You recently started an Instagram account titled I.am.done.being.obese with periods in between there if people are looking for it.
Yeah.
And it kind of took off.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Last night crossed over 200,000 followers.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's just insane. I told my wife, I'm like, I didn't earn this. I was given this.
Yeah.
As a platform. I did not anticipate it growing this. I knew I wanted to be in this field and be a disruptor in the health world, because there's a lot. I'll get into that more as we go, but I wanted to be at 100,000 followers by the end of the year.
Yeah.
And we hit 100K in the first 3 days.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I did not anticipate that. But yeah, I mean, my story, I don't even know where to start with that. I mean, what do you want to talk about? Like, specifically in health or?
And you've been sharing it. Obviously, people can find out a little bit more. Like I was struck by it and kind of how this all started. I think day 2, I just on my feed, hanging out on Instagram, and I just, see someone that, and I'm like, their titles, I'm done being obese. And the story captivated me. I mean, there seemed to be like this honest, like, I'm done, and a journey that you can follow. And this is, I mean, we're talking 7 days ago.
Yeah, literally. Today's day 8.
Day 8.
Yeah.
So,
and 1 week since I've started like publicly working out.
Yeah. So it was cool, and I didn't know. I'm like, oh, where's this guy from? I mean, there's followers from everywhere, so you don't know. And then I'm like, we got this series going on, and let's just try to send him a message and see if he'll just be on, because I think it really fits into this. And you happen to be in Omaha, which is wild. And so it really felt like God led, us to this conversation and joining in this. So thanks for being here and being willing to share your journey. But yeah, wherever, I think, what I guess led you to launch this?
I mean, I grew up in a very morbidly obese household, and my mom and dad were both very bigger people, and same with me and my brother. We were all kind of heavier set, and I knew there would be a lot of people who would resonate with that idea, and this kind of was like, I know I need to be the change I want to see, and I'm tired of no hate on athletes whatsoever, but I'm tired of athletes telling bigger people how to lose weight when they never walked through that themselves. Yeah. And so I wanted people to have a day one experience from like heavy set down all the way down, and for them to track like with me. And the goal is like when I get down to where I want to be, so to make that into a documentary and then blast it at as many people as I possibly can, because I want people to know that like you can be healthy, and like it's not just like an idea or an aberration or like this thing floating in the air. Like it's like this idea that's so lofty that you can't achieve it. I want people to know like you can see from my day 1 all the way to my day whatever what the process took, what I was thinking, what I was feeling. And there are, at this point, so many people who resonate with my thoughts going on, because there's multiple times, like the only time I actually wanted to get out inside and walk was day 6. And every other day and workout was like,
it's been cold too.
Yeah, it's been cold. Like on I think it was like day 3 or day 4, I woke up and it was in the morning and it was like 10 degrees, 11 degrees. I'm like, nope. We're not doing this.
I'm curious how much of starting the account was there any intention of thinking, hey, this is going to hold me accountable to what I'm setting out to do? Or was that kind of more of just like an afterthought? Because I think when you do that, you're like, oh, maybe I'll have a few hundred people that are going to kind of hold me accountable to what I'm saying. But then to jump up, and I think today you're sitting at over 200,000 followers. Like there's a different maybe sense of accountability there.
I was anticipating like my friends and my family going, you didn't post today. Where you at?
Yeah.
Or even when I go to church and these people were like, hey, you only posted 3 or 4 days out of the week where,
Yeah.
And so there's this thought in the back of my mind is like, oh man, they're going to talk to me if I don't do this. And for some people, you need a little bit of that push of like externally to get you there. And I call it building momentum.
Yeah.
I mean, that's nothing, profound or new, but it's the idea of like when you're pushing something big, the first several steps are always the hardest. And then once it gets rolling, then it just seems to generate itself. And so,
It's good.
Well, I think the interesting thing about this, I mean, 'cause I think of there's been entertainment, quote unquote, around this idea of like the Biggest Loser, right? Mm-hmm. But it's all in this perfect setting where you're sent off to this ranch. You've got these perfect trainers. You've got everything is set up for you, right? And this is very different because it's you living your normal life. You're the one editing, putting it all together, and that's what life is. Mm-hmm. Most people don't just get to go away hoping to win $1 million, and obviously I think there's whole things you could get into about that show, but I think that's what the interesting authenticity, part of that. Because I think people like that authenticity from like a show like that or others that are there, but like this is like, no, I'm controlling the narrative. I'm controlling all of this.
What's interesting is that I've had a lot of social media agencies hit me up and say, oh, if you want to grow to the millions, this is what you need to do. And I'm like, no, because it's not because I disagree with them, but I'm like, for me, the most important thing is, just this needs to be a window to see who I am without trying to make content. There's a lot of people out here who are wanting to make content. I've even had a lot of people who have stories like mine trying to just, build their, they say, hey, can I get a shout out? I've been trying to, build my stuff and build my platform and stuff. I just want to get known out there. And I'm like, the mission is the goal here. I don't care if you remember who I am. Like, forget who I am. I ain't that special. But I want you to see a window of opportunity so you can see this can happen. And it's going to happen with some random dude with no agency, with no representation, with no brands, with no affiliations, with no anything, and living his everyday life. Like today I posted, I know today I'm going to work out late because I just have a very busy day today. I need people to know that your life and health don't need to be like two different things. They can be the same thing. They can ebb and flow together, but they need to be liquid and not so like callous and cut and you have to do it this way and you have to go to the gym and you have to do this. Like I'm losing weight at home with a piano bench. Like I think it's like my day 3 or 4 work. It's literally me and my piano bench and some weights my wife has. That's it. And I've lost 15 pounds this week. And I know I'm at week 1, but we're going to grow.
Yeah.
One of the things I think a lot of people do at this time of year is we come up with these resolutions or goals. It's an easy time to set goals, and I do that every year as well to kind of have a reset. But one of the things that I like to try to frame that with is going into it with first understanding, and I always go back to the Psalm that David wrote. That's a lot of people know, but in Psalm 139, especially 14, he says, I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. And before I launch into something, I like to ask myself this question. I want all of us to answer it as maybe honestly as we can. Like, when was the last time like you genuinely believe that? Because I convince myself if I don't actually believe that, if I don't start with that I'm worth it, that this God made me wonderfully and beautifully, then my motivation's going to fall off. But if I start at that point, like, this is wild. He breathed stars and galaxies, and yet he made me. And so that recenters me. So I'm curious for you guys, like, when was the last time you really sensed that, feeling?
Yeah, that's a challenging question because I don't think I've ever like thought about it. I think I read that and I go, "That's good for someone to hear."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I don't put myself in that position. So even being asked that now I mean, if you want me to be honest, like being real, I don't know if I believe it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know. Like I don't believe it about myself. I can easily believe it about you or anybody else.
My kids,
Yeah.
you know.
But to put it, like, look in the mirror and go, I'm wonderfully made. Oh, no. Like here's the reason why I'm not, you know? So I don't know. That's a really tough question to answer. Thanks for putting me on the spot.
Yeah, I think it's good. It's a good recentering thing for us to
to think about. I think too, like when you ask the question, it's so obvious how much our culture influences that Bible verse too. Because when you think wonderfully made, like our culture influences what wonderfully made is. So to me, wonderfully made, like we can all think of a picture in our head of what that is or what that looks like or how that functions. And this is really challenging for me because I think like when I'm asking people, even as a therapist, like, hey, I want you to believe this. But then in my mind, I'm like, oh, do I even believe that about myself or take that on for myself? I think the last time that I thought this was recently, or I would say, I don't know if I'm kind of in the same boat with you, Eric. I think it's really hard to feel wonderfully made. But the last time that was just like, you have to work on this is my kids they are very tall, and kids do not describe at school like tall kids that they tower like 6 inches over their classmates. They're just tall kids, but they will say like, hey, you're fat or Tyler's big or Gavin's like they just like will describe things very bluntly.
Yeah.
And my middle was crying because somebody had said this to him, and it just breaks your heart to see a kid putting those things onto them and not understanding what it means. But I was like sitting there holding him as he's crying, and I'm like, man, like my body that I struggle with, that like doesn't feel good enough, that like I hate at times, like made this little human, and like I have to fix like myself, and like I have to be genuinely like working on believing that I'm wonderfully made because I want the people in my life to feel that, and I have to feel that value to be able to like help them believe that and to really have to speak with truth and confidence into them. Like I have to have a little bit of that. And so for me, when I met with those moments, I'm like, God, help me to believe like what I believe about him and what I want to build into him. And then just knowing like people see how we treat ourselves and like what we say about ourselves. And so Nathan, that's one reason that I love your account, is because I feel that genuine like come as you are, like you're valuable no matter kind of where you're at, that you bring, because I think that that's something that's really missing in our culture when we interact with this kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think the best way I can describe it is when the Bible says, love your neighbor as yourself. And we have no problem like pouring out love. We have a problem giving self-love.
Yeah.
And it's like if I had this water bottle and if all I did was pour out every single time somebody needed something, eventually what does that leave me on the inside? Leaves me empty. But if I've filled this water bottle all the way up, and as it starts going to the top and then it starts overflowing, so when people need something, I'm already overflowing. So when I go to people and they need something from me, I'm not pouring out, costing at my expense. I'm now just overflowing onto you. So now we're both full, you know? And for me, like I would say the best way that I could even love my children is to love myself, is to make sure they see somebody who's completely confident in who they are.
Yeah.
And so they know who they are as my own children. And I got younger kids. I've got 8 and 5 years old, and so I have the prime opportunity to raise them into that. And I think it's even connected to my post yesterday, which is going to be day 7 for anybody else watching this in a different time.
Yeah.
If you go into my Instagram, day 7, I talk about rhythms of rest, and in there I talk about self-worth. And what I've learned about me is that my self-worth and my self-love doesn't increase the more and more I go on this journey. What it actually is that it's already where it needs to be. I just become more and more aware of it. And so it's not the increase of the thing, it is the awareness of the thing. You're kind of discovering more and more and more about it, and you realize just how much God loves you, because that's where it's from. It's the agape of God, how you are chosen, not forsaken. You're the head and not the tail. You're above and not beneath. You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood. I can go into all these things of who you are and who God made you to be. And that's why from that place, I go into how this works into health.
Yeah.
Is because if you love yourself, you realize that you and obesity are not compatible. You're not. Like true self-love and body positivity is realizing the thing that you have was not made to be in all of this pain that for some are deliberately choosing to say that they're compatible with these things. And so I would urge anybody listening to this, it's not that your self-love increases, the volume of it increases. No, your awareness of how God loves you and who you are begins to more revealed as time goes on, as you begin to make healthier choices. Because I was like, we all remember being kids being picked on.
Yes.
Like we all remember being bullied. What's interesting is that some of those narratives haven't changed from people who were 10, 12 years old to now being 30 and 40 years old. The immaturity of those statements hasn't changed. Yeah. It's like, oh, you're fat, or you're this, or you're too tall, or you're too short, you're this, or you're too skinny. It's like all these labels that we then transcend into our, further ages and how we think and how we operate. And so we say, oh, I am fat, or I am this. And for my particular story, I embraced the words I am fat for so long. And then I have to say, like, you are not fat, you have excessive fat. There's a difference. Anybody who's struggling with obesity, you need to realize, like, you're not fat, you have fat. It's something you carry, which also means it's something that you can let go of and change and, move about your life. But getting rid of it also doesn't mean that you're now all of a sudden now more self-worth. No, you are like up here, and you just need to become more and more aware of that as time goes on.
Yeah. And I love that both of you pointed out that bullying thing. And the reality is, as we grow older, the biggest bully becomes us, because we start to believe that. And the person that's actually telling us that we're this or that actually is no longer even out. Like we learn how to drown out those bullies, but inside of us is the biggest
I have
bully.
haters in my comments all the time. And I'm like, I comment, I don't blame y'all.
Yeah.
Because if you think that your fire is hot, you should have seen the fire in my own head.
Yeah.
Okay. If you think that you're drowning me, you should have seen the oceans I drowned myself in.
Yeah.
Like, and so that's why when I see people hating on me on my comments of saying, oh, you're only at day 3 or blah, blah, whatever. I'm like, I don't blame you. I don't.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I had this own narrative in my own head. So if it's happening externally, I don't blame you.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to let you, slip by without getting one. Like I'm saved, not soft. Like I'm going to talk with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
What let's talk a little bit about the inverse of that, though. I mean, besides the haters, obviously people are following you for whatever reason. Maybe it is to, I want to watch this guy fail or something like that. But I'm assuming there's still kind of an overwhelming amount of support that you're encountering as well.
Incredible amount.
So what does that feel like? What is that? Are there challenges that have come along with that, or what's your experience overall been?
The overwhelming support I've received. There are a lot of people who we live in a comment society. So everybody's quick to get on the bandwagon for a comment, but not for a lifestyle. And so I've been very particular with a fine-tooth comb of who do I want to like receive from, like truly receive from. Because there are people who were just, oh, good job. I'm so proud of you. I'm here for this. And they're sharing the story and they're saying all this stuff. And that's great. But, I mean, y'all, like, we live in a clout generation.
Yeah.
And so it's going to happen to where and that's where, like, this is where people can kind of put me on a pedestal and say my story is going to be different because, you got 200,000 followers in X amount of days and you got all these people. I've had celebrities hit me up. I've had, all these nutritionists and coaches. And I straight up have multiple times, and I will continue to say that I'm glad you're doing this, but if you don't do this for somebody else, this is fake. This is fake.
Yeah.
And I've had people come and say, offer me free programs and free training and free nutrition. I said, hey, listen, I feel convicted of doing this one way. Thank you for your offer. Now take your offer and go find somebody with 20 followers and give it to them.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do it for anybody else, this is all just for fake and for clout, and you just want to use my platform for profit. I'm not here for profit. I'm here to be a prophet against obesity.
Yeah.
And so, ooh, that's good. I'm gonna
There you go. Write that down.
I'm gonna
out
write that
now.
down.
Put it on.
But if the best way I can say is just like, if you're going to truly support someone in this journey, realize that it's not going to be linear.
Yeah.
It's going to go like this.
Yep.
It's going to look like the stock market. It's going to be, just spiky, and there's going to be big ups and big downs. And honestly, it's okay if people gain weight back, like a couple pounds, because that's how we all work. That's how humans work, period. And it's okay if when they lose, and like throw some like gas on their fire when they're when they're losing it all, and they're like,
Yeah.
But when they are just down in the dumps because they just gained back 2 pounds after all that work,
Yeah.
just realize, hey, that doesn't mean you're not healthy. Humans will naturally fluctuate 5 to 7 to 8 pounds, like on a consistent basis. So that's completely okay. So if you're like gained back 2 pounds, guess what? Your self-worth didn't leave. Like your value is not determined by the scale,
Yeah.
So
It's easier said than done. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, I've struggled with gaining weight and losing weight for a long time. And it's one of those things where that number on that scale dictates my mood that day.
Yeah.
You know, if it's up or it didn't move much, I'm like, my value, my attitude towards what I see in that, it shouldn't be, but it really will dictate the mood. And it's like, how do you move past that? Like, no matter how many times I've heard someone say what you're saying, still inside I'm going, yeah, sure.
it's like
You know?
it's why I call it momentum.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to be releasing the ability to talk with me in a consultation call. I'm calling it the mindset momentum.
I love
Is
that.
because I want people like this who are like, oh, that number on the scales really determined how I feel that day, and I kind of get upset. And I want to change the narratives of what you talk about in your own head and what you think about
that's
yourself.
good.
Because just because you gain some weight back doesn't mean you're not losing fat.
Yeah.
The idea here is like, and I'll talk about this because I've got mountains of notes. I'm a note taker, y'all. And, when I'm meditating and thinking and praying through like what does the Lord want me to say to people, like I'll show you my notes. Like I'm one of those weird note takers to where like I write just a god awful amount of notes.
Yeah.
I love
It
that.
looks
Okay.
like my notes section, everything.
And so your value is not attached to the number on the scale. And just because that scale is fluctuating does not mean you haven't lost fat. Because here's the thing, people who are more healthier, they still have fat.
Yeah.
Fat is an essential thing to live. You need fat to live. Okay, you need calories, you need proteins, you need carbs, you need fats. And those are the 4 primary macros that people track. And people all ask me all the time, well, what macros are you tracking? What are you doing? How many fats are you eating? How many of this? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just eat better. I don't have a diet. I just eat better. I eat healthier. And we'll get into the practicals later on. I want to stay around the idea of mindset beyond food, because a lot of people, when they weigh themselves, they see the number and they fall apart and they go, just because you fluctuate does not mean that you haven't achieved the goal.
Yeah.
And so there are people who are still moving toward their goal and have gained 3 pounds back.
Yeah.
And there's this thing called water weight, which is very real
Yeah.
and very happens. And you have to not look at the outcome so much as the input,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and know that you're moving toward that for your inputs.
And I'm excited. In a couple episodes, I think we've got a dietitian that'll come on and probably break it down in more scientific terms. But when I was having a conversation with her, she was like, removing good and bad, like morality from food is a big thing, because we say good and bad and all those things, and then that makes us attach morality to it. And then when we attach morality to something, I'll let her explain way more than that because I probably butchered it, so sorry. But and I was like, man, that's so good. And I think people need to hear that part. And for me, I'm like you, Eric, where, and to get back to the love understanding, like, you know, in 1 John 4, it says we love because he's loved us first. And so even that idea of pouring something out, like I have to realize in my own kids, when I'm not realizing I'm beloved, I'm robbing them of my ability to love them, because we can only love as deep, like as much as I know that I'm beloved, as much as I really believe it, as much as I really can own Christ died for me. It's hard. I have ebbs and flows of how much I can really fathom how incredible that love is. But days that I feel less than, or days that I feel like I'm not beloved, then I cannot project real, true love to the people that need it in my lives. And so I think that's such an important thing I have to consistently remind myself of when I see the scale, or I throw the pants on and they're a little tighter, or whatever those things are. I get a few more wrinkles, those image-driven things. When I start to let that shame or the things start to rob me, I'm not just robbing myself of being beloved, but I'm robbing those who I'm called to love in my ability to do that, because I can't give out in real love, sacrificial love, what I'm not believing about myself.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about just the transparency that you have? I feel like it's really inviting, especially seeing you being vulnerable, just because, I mean, that's something that we all struggle with. I really struggle with, like, I'll open up to the guys, like sometimes even more after I've shared something after we're done recording on the podcast, because it's just like really hard to be as transparent as you're being and as vulnerable as you're being. I really admire that. And it really shows me how that's a great way to even invite people into your journey. Can you just talk a little bit about that in your life? Because even seeing you like the past week that you've been, I'm like, this guy has been walking in this and like practicing this and experiencing what transparency looks like more than 7 days.
I use the word transparency because we like the ability to say I can see through it. You know, I kind of relate with it more as like a wound. And it's funny, I have a scar on my elbow right here from the car accident I was in. And I got in the car accident, and you know, we tipped over on the side, and my arm busted through the window, drug on the ground for a little bit, really gashed my arm open. And paramedics got there, and they're like, "You need to go to the hospital." I'm like, "Well, I ain't trying to pay. I'm fine. I can walk." You know, I'm from a small farmer town, and so we didn't go to the emergency room unless something was broken or bleeding. And I am bleeding. Okay, all right, I gotta whatever. And but I'm not trying to pay for no ambulance ticket. Like I ain't trying to pay for that. And so they're like, "Well, you need to go to the ER." I'm like, "Yes." And I'm like, and they said, "Okay, we're going to have you sign this, and I need you to go to the ER." I'm like, "Okay," signed it, walked away, and I called my mom, who was a paramedic at one time. I said, "Hey, Mom, I need you."
Mama.
And I went to her house, and I'm like, "Listen, if you tell me that I have to go to the ER to get this figured, because I know what they're going to do. They're going to stitch me up. They're going to do this stuff." And I'm like, "I know you can do this. Can you do this?" And she looked at me and goes, "Yeah, I can do this, but you should go to the doctor." I'm like, "Okay, if you can do it." So we did this at home stitching and everything else like that, patched it up. But she put me in this splint, and she said, "Listen, there's going to be a time that you have to keep this under wraps, and there's going to have to be a time where you take the wraps off and put it in the air." And all the pastors in here just went, "Amen."
Yeah.
There's going to be a time where you have to expose it to the air so that way it can scab up and heal. Because if you keep it under like this too long, it will become infected. And there's going to be a time where you have to take the wraps off and change your bandages and let it out. And you can kind of see where I'm going with this analogy, is that there is times when people who are remaining to be obese are choosing to keep things under wraps and not deal with the underlying issues that they think that they're compatible with this. I use the words agreement a lot. You'll see me use that specifically in like day 6, where I say you have to break your agreement with food. I talk about food morality a little bit there. But I want to rabbit trail so hard on that, but I want to stay on the tact here. I talk about agreement, and the word agree means to come in together and be harmonious with, and to say that actually the definition is a lack of incompatibility, a lack of incompatibility. So people who are saying I can be compatible with obesity have this clear cognitive dissonance, because we can all agree that obesity is something that we should see eradicated as much as humanly possible. I know that there are people who are struggling with medically diagnosed legit issues that kind of affect that very differently, like PCOS and some problems with thyroids, and that's totally understandable. I still don't think that you shouldn't just be a victim and just lay back and then not do anything about it. But it does mean that I know that there are complications. But for people like me, who represent the majority of America, we don't have any medical complications. This is just a choice. It is because the wound that we have received from being bullied and being whatever has been kept under wraps. And so we found coping mechanisms in food. And what's interesting is, like, we rejoiced with food, and then we got stressed, and then we ate, and then we got upset, and then we ate, and then we got sad, and then we ate, and we got happy, and then we ate, and then we just ate all the time, And for me, that wound of saying I'm not bringing my coping mechanisms to the Lord, He says, cast all your fears and all your anxieties on me. They'll give me those things. And I gave it to mashed potatoes, and I gave it to fried chicken, and I gave it to cream style corn. I'm getting hungry. And I love those things, and those things are not bad. Like, food is not the enemy. The enemy is your habits around food.
Yeah.
And your beliefs about who you are and what is, and that's why I dial that back to, like, food's not the enemy. Yourself, your view of yourself is the enemy. Because right now it's negative, and you think that you need to cope inside of those things. And the wound that you haven't let out, is now becoming infected, and it's metastasizing into your mindset of saying that this is just how life is. Yeah. And I'm too far gone, and I'm too far this, and I can't get out. And I want people to know, y'all, you can let go and let those things out and let it air out. Because if you keep it wrapped up for too long, it becomes infected. But there are times where you have to let it out and let it heal, and then rebandage can come back in, and then let it out and let it heal. And eventually you'll realize, like, I have full function. It's like it never happened.
Yeah.
And there will be people like that who, like my scar on my elbow, who will have a lifestyle and lose enough weight to the point where it's like it never happened in the first place. So, yeah.
Well, you talk a lot about it. Just kind of a practical mindset. I think you're not selling a product, you're not selling a plan, but the U.S. weight loss industry right now is valued at around $72 billion, at least as of 2023. And I think, social media is just flooded with influencers who are selling you, a shake, a medication,
nutrition, vitamins,
whatever it is, But I think how do you do you plan to kind of maybe navigate that when that comes your way? You've mentioned a little bit about how you've turned down offers and things like that, but what's your thought on that, and how do you speak to people who are just looking for the quick, easy button way out? I think right now we're seeing Ozempic is kind of like the thing. A lot of people are talking about it, a lot of people are using it. Is that something, like, is that an option for you? What are your thoughts on that? How are you going to react? Because I think those comments are probably coming if they haven't already. And like that.
Whoever is obese listening to me, I need you to hear me with your heart. You didn't get here through one meal. You didn't get here through 2 meals or 3 meals or a week worth of meals or a month worth of meals. You didn't get here through you got here through deliberate long choices. Mm-hmm. How do you think getting out of it is going to look?
Yeah.
It's going to be deliberate, long choices. You have to purposely choose, okay, well, if getting here took me time, because we all started at the same place, okay? And I know there are varies of, I know, and there's always going to be variables, okay? I'm not going to say there's not going to be variables, but we all started with a deliberate choice of what should and should not be, what is healthier decisions and what is not. And y'all, I'm going to tell you right now, like, you want birthday cake? Go get birthday cake. You don't need birthday cake 5 times a week. Unless you got like a mom with like 11 kids, then oh my.
Just celebrate it all together.
Yeah. Well, in my family, July is a heavy birthday family. Like so my wife is July 9th, my daughter's July 24th, I'm July 30th. And so we just have one birthday because, I mean, I don't mind having 3. I love birthday cake. But what I'm saying is it took deliberate long choices for you to get to, because you don't just like, all of a sudden you're 200 pounds, or 200 pounds overweight. It took me, a while to get here. And that also means it's going to take you time to get back and change your mindset. Because a lot of people, they see the scale and they just want to get out of it as soon as they can. And it's like, hey, pull the reins back a little bit and realize like this is not going to take you a day. It's not going to take you a week. It's not going to take you a month. It's not going to take you several months. The amount of time it took you to get here is also comparable to the amount of time that it will take you to get out. Because a lot of people who, like, you can't gain 200 pounds in a year unless you're trying to.
Yeah.
It took me well over 15 years to get to this point. So why am I upset because in a month I haven't lost 2 pounds?
Yeah.
And for those that aren't going to go follow your Instagram, older listeners are just listening, they don't see you right now. Like, will you share just, obviously you have on your Instagram, like, how much do you weigh? Just for the person that's like, I'm curious, like, who is this guy? All I hear is a voice here. So tell us that, because I think there's the other side is like, you're saying all the right things, right? Like you know this stuff and yet you got there, right? So like, share with us like where that's at, where the journey's been so far, what your goals are, just on a practical number side. And then like also that battle of, I know, and then this now you're on this regression or this progression of, and now I'm on that long journey back, right?
Yeah.
So will you share that?
So on December 31st, I hit the scale for the first time in a long time, and it said 470.2 pounds. And that was just like, very daunting. And younger me would have like just given up and just say, well, I'm too far gone. But that's also how I thought when I was 250 pounds, because when I was 20 years old, I was only like 50, 60 pounds overweight. And I thought, and I'll get into that here in a second. Actually, no, I'm gonna get into it now real quick. My self-talk and my self-narrative has created this person that I am now. And I talked about myself then when I was only 50 pounds overweight as if I was now 200 plus pounds overweight. And what I've done is I've kind of whittled myself into this, or anti-whittled. I like, what I'm saying? Whittling is cutting, but I've created a self-defeating prophecy because my narrative for the last decade and a half has been aimed at becoming this. So why am I surprised? Why am I daunted when I see the scale? When this has been my narrative since I was 20 and even when I was 15 and 16 years old. And I'm 32. And so 32 and a half, my birthday's in July. So, I mean, I'm about to hit 33. So I'm 32, but, anyway, but the narrative has been this way for all that time. So I've created myself into this. And so challenge your narrative, break your agreements with bad stuff. But back to the practical. So I'm 6'3", 470.2 pounds at that time. I weighed in 456 pounds when my last weigh-in. My actual next weigh-in is today. And so we'll see what it is. But I'm weighing in every other day and about every 2 to 3 days. And so we'll see where I'm at.
Yeah. I think it's helpful for the people that are listening. They're like, okay, I hear this voice, but where are you in the journey? So that's really helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. So this isn't my first big push. I made another big push back in 2019, right before COVID, and I lost like 70 pounds. So I know what I'm capable of. So I know how to get there. But so I know where I'm going to plateau, what's going to happen next. And I would love to bring people through that. And hopefully by the time that people are hearing this on my Instagram, if you go there, you're going to see a website where You can get into a Discord community and all that stuff, everything else like that. We can talk and chat there. But the practical stuff is just getting a scale, knowing where you're at. I had to special buy this scale because most scales don't go up to my weight. So nice little punch to the to the self-worth there. And then, there's a lot of exercise equipment that doesn't even have capacities for me. And so that's why I'm like, finding the right scale, finding the right equipment has been hard, because most of these like treadmills have a 350 pound capacity. I'm like, over that, and so, but there you go.
Oh, sorry, Jess. I thought you had something to say. No.
Oh, no. I'm just thinking about just with the spiritual side of the conversation. Like, it's a hard subject to talk about in church. Like, I mean, I know a couple of different times we've talked about it at CCC and we've had conversations about it. And I think even like when I'm one-on-one with clients, I mean, it's hard to bring up like when, maybe they don't see it as an issue, but I can see like it's tied into their value or how they're thinking. But why do you think that maybe the church or just even like Christian communities like don't talk about it a lot? Do you feel like that they do? Do you feel like we're talking about it in the right way? How should we be talking about it from your opinion?
In my opinion, this is just my opinion, so don't put me on a cross here. We love our sins in the dark. We love our sins to be put in the dark. And when we talk about weight, you can't hide that. Yeah. It's very out there and apparent. So we don't like talking about it because there's blatantly the fruit of your action. And so that's why people get scared and they don't want to they kind of just tiptoe around it because it's very clear that now overeating and having excessive amounts of fat is not the sin. Getting there could be compared. It depends on where you're at in your mindset, but there are people who have medical complications who've been struggling with weight and they get there. And I definitely think the Lord wants to, do a thing in their life. I wouldn't necessarily say that they're sinning. There's legit things that are happening medically. Okay. And those are very real and they're very there. And I would definitely say find somebody who can help work with you along with those things. And we talked about even Ozempic, how this ties into that, and I'll kind of connect it all together. But I'm completely natural. I don't take any supplements. I don't take any things. I'm a very big proponent for your supplements and your nutrients need to come from food and not from anything synthetic or anything that is not natural or something that can be plucked out of the ground or killed with a bow and arrow or a gun,
You're a big dye guy, though, right?
Yeah, anti-dye. Death to dyes.
I heard that. That's why I just...
Yeah. So I'm very against dyes. I'm very against... And some people are like, oh, you're one of those weird homeopathic whatevers. And I'm like, no, this is what the Lord gave us. This is how it was. When we were talking about, back then, he just gave you animals to kill and eat. That's literally what he said to Peter. He goes, kill and eat. I'm like, yes, Lord. And there are people who pluck their food out of the ground, and I believe that that's the way that. And this is not like a biblical conviction. This is a Nathan conviction. This is I believe that. Yeah. But the Ozempic and the things like that kind of help people with those things that are PCOS and thyroid issues. They kind of level the playing field a little bit. Yeah. To help those people lose weight, and so I do see that it does have a place. But a lot of people that if you don't have a medically diagnosed thing, and you're trying to take Ozempic, then you're just medicating what should be happening in your mind. And you're trying to make a thing happen, and you think that once you lose the weight, all the problems go away. And what you need to medicate is not your body. You need to medicate your thought process by going to therapy, by finding therapists, by talking with people, finding those things, and how those affect spiritually is, it all really connects to mindset. And when we talk about this in the church and when we bring this up in church, and the immediate thing that people do who are heavier, and I say this as the chief of sinners, is they go and they compare and go, oh, well, you're skinny and you're this and you're that. Because here's the thing, most churches of this size, most mega church pastors are not obese. They have some type of goals driven life. They're healthy, whatever. And so they automatically go, well, you don't know. And you don't know this, and you don't know the things that I've walked through. And that's very true. That's very, very true. Like, if people haven't been heavier, then they don't know what it's like to be 200 pounds overweight, 100 pounds overweight. Some of these people, the most they've ever struggled was like being 20 or 30 pounds overweight. And I'm like, I would love that problem, But when you're hitting the 50 plus, 70 plus, 80, 100 plus, 200 plus pounds overweight, there is something that is dark in your mind that a lot of people don't understand. And that's why I'm a huge proponent for getting therapy. As you as a therapist, I'm sure you are too.
Yeah.
But I said this and when I was filming the day 6 video, and I wanted to save it for another time, but I said, if you are morbidly obese for an undiagnosed medical issue, you need therapy. There's something wrong. There is a cognitive dissonance. And the reason why we don't like talking about it in the church is because the fruit is there. Mm-hmm. It is out in the open. So don't talk about it because I don't want my stuff. I don't want to deal through that right now. And when you talk about it, I'm going to compare myself and then automatically put you at a place where I'm going to hear you in my ears, but not my heart, because you don't know what I've walked through. And that's why I feel called to be a disruptor, because I'm going to be a whistleblower within the industry and say, listen, I've walked through it. And I can tell you right now that gluttony is very much a sin. It is very much alive. It is very much prevalent. And there's a lot of people who are trying to help, and they exist. But then there are a lot of people like Big Pharma or Big Food who are trying to capitalize on that by either selling you too much food and getting you there, and then Big Pharma, selling you a bunch of these drugs and things that try to get you overweight. But this is a problem with your mind, not a problem with your body.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to those things, be prepared to get vulnerable. Be prepared to let it air out, like open up the wound. Because you're not the wounds you have. Because even though you have scars, like I have a complete scar where this is now, it's like it never happened.
Yeah.
It's there, and I can rejoice and say, hey, listen, this is who I was, And so
it's tough because I think we grow up believing things not only about ourselves, but about the food that we eat and what that means, and how we see ourselves. And you mentioned like growing up with your family's bigger, so it's like it's kind of the norm. And I think for me, probably around 10 years ago, I was at the biggest I'd ever been. I was probably around 330 pounds, and it's one of those things where I kind of had a similar situation. I had a lot of family, bigger people. It was just kind of normal, and it's like you start to have this self-awareness where you're like, wait, maybe there is something wrong. Like maybe I do need to fix something, but you still, even when you start to get better or take those steps, there are things you just still believe about yourself. There's things you believe about food, and for me it was always like, oh well, if I keto, that's the thing. Or back then it would have been Atkins or something like that. Same thing. But it's that's the solution, because carbs are my enemy or whatever. And then if I stop doing that for a day or something like that, it was like, oh well, I messed up. I might as well quit. Might as well just go back to the way I was, because I'm not making progress. But I think you start to believe those little lies about things, and like you said earlier, you start to make food the enemy. But what are some of those messages about food or body image that we all kind of, maybe we can all chime in here, but like that you grew up believing that you've had to overcome because they've been more of a hindrance than something that helps you?
I would love to have somebody else start on that. I'm talking way too much.
Yeah. Jess, Alex, you guys have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I just grew up in a large family, and so, I just built habits of food around, if you want seconds, you got to eat the fastest. Like people around me, they just joke, and I am like, people are like, I haven't even like prayed for my food and you're done, dude. What the heck?
I can attest to seeing you eat very fast.
Yeah, like the problem is most people don't see it. They just see it gone. They see it there and they see it gone. And like I've realized I've built food habits around that desire to need seconds, especially when I was probably a kid and I needed them probably more than I was now growing and things like that. And now, like it's mandatory. Like that's what I do. Like I have, and so then I've created this whole entire thing where I overeat because of that, because I just eat fast, and then my body doesn't even have enough time to like literally tell my brain that I'm no longer hungry. So then I just keep shoveling it in, you know. And
or they don't drink enough water.
Or water. Yeah. Water. Like I don't even. There are literally times I've and maybe this is more for sport, like. And maybe this is a confession, and everyone will do it. I've gone to like Texas de Brazil one time, and I'm like, I'm not drinking even any water today because I want to indulge in as much as I can, you know. Yeah. And even at that meal, I'm like, I'm not letting water in there. I'm paying a lot of money for this nice red meat, and I'm going to eat it, you know. And I'm like, yeah, there was nothing healthy about that, you know. It's good to go there, but. So for me, I've been just shaped around that a lot. And, you know, the more and more I figure out my relationship with food and what that looks like, the more I come to, you know, some of those realizations. And my kids watch it and they're like, Dad, what, you know, and now I'm shaping them because they watch and, Dad, why do you eat so fast and all those things? And I wasn't even able to put a finger on it until you actually do enough work to look back. You know, when my wife, I get married and she's like, why the heck do you eat so fast? Like, and there's a lot of fast eaters, but I'm talking like abnormally fast.
I resonate with that so much because it was one of those. It's like it was the race to the second plate.
Yeah,
it was like how fast can you go before all the stuff is gone? Yeah, and so I'm like that. Yeah, I've never resonated with this thing.
Yeah, one time I was on a guys trip and these fools thought it was okay to, you know, challenge me in a chicken nugget eating contest, and I think they were just shocked how fast. Like they're like, that is not humanly possible to eat that fast, and so it was wild. How about you, Jess?
I feel like I just remember growing up, and I feel like this is very true to today, that comments and feedback about how you look just happen. And so even as a kid, it was like, oh, Jess looks this way, or just like making comments about how I look. And I feel like that kind of became something that I took as feedback, like very deeply. So it was like, oh, well, Jess is a little like big boned. I remember being like, that was just something like as a kid that I heard. And so then like I interpreted that a certain way and it was negative. It wasn't good. And then, you know, like, I mean, I feel like a lot of women can relate, like our bodies change a lot, like, you know, during puberty. And then I was like a certain amount of weight up until, you know, I got married. But I just feel like people make comments. And so I was always like, okay, I'm doing good because they're saying good stuff. And then like I gained weight. So over having kids, and then I have had some medical issues with weight. I like fluctuated between gaining 90 pounds like through having kids and stuff. And then now like working on figuring that out. But a lot of my worth and like a lot of things that I have heard from people is, oh, well, wow, you look really good. Like, wow, what have you been doing? And so desperately, like just reflecting how I wanted to hear like, man, you're a really good mom. Or like, man, you're like a really great person and you have a good personality, you know? But like, I think a lot of times, and it just makes me more sensitive with how I interact with people of, okay, maybe I can say, oh, hey, like, I love your style or I love how you look. But I'm always thinking of like, okay, and what else do I like about them? And that's just naturally something for me that I've had to develop out of that. But I think for me, I took that very deeply, and that feedback a lot more to heart than I think that I would maybe share normally.
And I think people who haven't fluctuated in their lives or haven't experienced that, like, I mean, I think the term is maybe fat tax, but they don't know what that's like to be judged on your appearance that way. Like they don't have a clue. And it's a very real thing. Like I've been on both sides of that and just experienced whether that's customer service somewhere, somebody doesn't want to give you the time of day versus, oh, now all of a sudden they think they're taking your size or whatever, they're valuing you differently. And it's like you said, that's so frustrating. And and I think people who haven't been in that place, they almost don't believe you when you bring that up.
It's like when you walk into a restaurant and then all of a sudden you see all the little, like little turn heads and double takes and everything, and you know what it's about, and they know what it's about, and then you see the look, and then you see the little giggles, the little it gets at you for a little bit, and so balancing that with self-worth is. I am not going to sit here and tell you that it is easy, but it is a choice.
Yeah.
And it is, you have to deliberately choose to counter that narrative that is so negative. And like, now here's the thing. I agree with positive reinforcement. I agree with even some keywords, some areas of negative reinforcement. And I think that you need to have that ebb and flow truly. But I tell you what, man, the power of positive thinking is so just there. There are times where you need to like tell yourself some negative things, like you cannot be this way.
Yeah.
And that's why my channel is I am done being obese, because it is saying like, I am done with this. It is more of a negative reinforcement, a bored reinforcement of like, I am done with this. But my inner talk is like, I'm still worth a lot. Like I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Going back to that, I'm the righteousness of God. I'm the head and not the tail. I'm above and not the beneath. I'm blessed in the city. I'm blessed in the field. I'm blessed with people. I'm blessed by myself. I'm in those times when I start saying those things. If you think that all of a sudden I say them and it's just like, oh, I'm good now.
Yeah, it's just magic words.
It doesn't. It's not a mantra, but it is a discipline. And when my pastor says it like this, he goes, at first it's a drudgery, and then it's a discipline, and then it becomes a delight. And when it's the exact same way, I'm kind of drudging through this. But the more you drudge through it, the weight of it becomes a discipline, and then it becomes a delight to where, and I'll tell you, like, I'm not at the delight phase yet,
Yeah.
And there are times when maybe I'm going to be at that in different places, but I know what's coming. I know where my hope is at. And for me, it starts with every time I feel like, even today, y'all, like coming on this podcast, like I didn't think I had hardcore imposter syndrome, like I'm like, I just started 8 days ago and y'all want to talk with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I've had a lot of these thoughts for months and dealing with, I had this thing where I had a business die because my thoughts were, because I'm a serial entrepreneur. I love business and we can talk about all that stuff later. But I had started a business with a couple of buddies of mine, and just the way there was a shift literally last December-ish where everything in my mind just started going downhill, and I lost that business. And that was just like a gigantic wake-up call for like, hey, I need to get in my prayer closet for a couple of months and just deal with some of these narratives that are happening in my head. Because I would have anxiety attacks, I'd have panic attacks. I'd be sitting just like that feeling of panic happening because of all this negative narrative that's happening in my head. And for months, it was happening until December 31st. I sat on that scale. Well, I didn't sat. Yeah, I stood on that scale and then saw my number. And the one thing I said was like, I'm done being obese. I'm done with this.
Yeah.
I'm done with this. There are times where you have to pump yourself up, and there are times where you need to take a stand against yourself and your negative thought processes and your negative things, and because you're completely worth it.
Yeah.
Like, you're completely worth the change.
I think one thing that might be helpful, just practical stuff from you, for maybe people in churches or family members or spouse or whatever, like how does someone approach that with you, right? Like, how do people that are close with you that say, I love you, and, obviously we all have like this, okay, if we love people, we have to have the hard conversation. Like, part of loving people is like, okay, where do I poke? Where do I address? How do I do that? And so, and obviously this is your narrative, so we're not saying this is going to work for everybody, whatever.
Yeah, this is just my side.
Yeah. So for you, are there helpful tips that you would say, yeah, this is not how to approach it with your spouse, or this is not how to approach it with a brother or sister in Christ, or a literal brother and sister, and here's been some helpful things that people have done in my life that have that have set me on the right path, that have called me out, all I knew it was love.
I really wish all the people around me were here to answer this question.
Yeah.
Specifically my wife. My wife is we're the complete opposites, and we're complementary. That's what the best way to say it. It's like there are people who are like, we're like this, and my wife and I are like this. Like we complement each other where we're opposites. I'm tall, she's short. I'm brown, she's blonde. I'm brown-eyed, she's blue-eyed. I'm a heavier person. She's like this petite, works out every single day, like everything. And she has loved me through so much the last decade. And because we've been married for 10 years in April. And I really wish my wife were here to answer this question because she could give you like a very clear, like, this is how, because she's seen me gain weight and still love me like I never have. And that's because her love for me, like we've talked about it before. She said, my love for you isn't determined by your weight. It's determined by the content of your character and who you are. Believing that is the hard thing.
Yeah.
Because when you get to that place and you start making it about like what I look like, or I'm not as attractive as I used to be, or I'm not as, thin as I used to be, that stuff gets in your head like hard. And I wish I could tell you, like, this is the way, this is the roadmap, this is how it happens. I can only tell you my story. And that is the idea of long suffering and the idea of patience is vital. People are dealing with narratives in their head that, man, like, if y'all only heard the things I've said about me to myself, you would think that here's a great way to say it. If I said the things that I've said to me to somebody else, I would not be on this podcast right now. And I would be brandished a hater and this.
Same. Yeah.
And, my wife has loved me through a lot. And I wish I could tell you, but if I were to point anything out, it's just patience and long patience, not short-term, mid-term. I'm talking like super long, extended amounts of bearing with somebody. Love bears all things. And this is one of those things that it bears is you on your journey of discovering, one, hopefully, how much you're worth. And defeating things, because my wife has said all these positive things about me to get me there, but I mean that's great to hear out here, but we all hear this voice inside of us. I don't know why, but we all do. That's just like, I think all of us can relate in some way, shape, or form, but I think we've all looked at the mirror and we did this. And there's that one sigh that feels heavier than gravity.
Yeah.
It is that one breath, and I think we all know that breath. And there are people listening to this that may know that breath that you take when you look at yourself, and you take that breath in, and it's heavy, and that has to be a clear indicator that you have to start taking on and becoming the warrior in your own head, and proclaiming things that may not have happened yet. You almost have to prophetically tell yourself that I'm worthless. I'm worth this.
Worth this, yeah.
I want to clarify. I'm not worthless. I'm worth this.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Bars. Notes.
Yeah. And man, I really wish I had a better answer. But on my side, it's just been, she's been loving me through it. And there has been so much modeled patience. And not only that, she worked out every single day, like doesn't not work out. And she never pushed that on me. She never was like, I am doing this. Why aren't you doing this? Like she never.
The guilt trip.
She never guilt tripped me. And she never, because there are people who, do that and they're frustrated looking at, because I'm like, they can do this too. Yeah. What my wife did was just model lifestyle to me. Yeah. And I love my mom, but my mom was at her heaviest, was around like upper 500-600 pounds. And she got a surgery, lost 300 plus pounds. It's phenomenal. Like, it's a great story. I'm going to be putting her when I make my podcast. I don't know when that will be, so follow me on Instagram.
Yeah.
But when that time comes, I want to bring her on because talk about the dynamic between raising a child, and we're going to have it's going to be a very candid, very raw podcast. I can't wait. But she never modeled health to me.
Yeah.
You know, she never modeled what it looked like to be in a lifestyle of health. And my wife does.
Yeah.
You know, like she just showed me over 10 years, like, oh, you can actually do this and not have to worry.
Yeah.
You know?
It's a different dynamic for sure.
Yeah.
That's good. And I think one of those, like, just to your point, I've told this to people a lot of times that it's anything that you think you can say to me, I've already said beyond that. And I get up and I look at myself in the mirror every day. You don't look at me every day. Like, I'm the one living with me, you know? And so it's like,
you think I'm echoing all
Yeah.
you think I'm echoing everything I've heard. No, I'm saying stuff to me.
Yeah, I'm real creative too.
Yeah,
like, you know, but you know, Nathan, I think we could go on and on with this as a subject even that's really close to me too. So I think there's a lot that I could even go on talking about, but you know, time is limited. But I do really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. I hope people are listening and are inspired by your willingness to stand out there and say, I'm going to do this. And I think we're all going to be following along and, you know, keeping you a little accountable as well as we go. But really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
And if you have any, do you have any final thoughts you want to say, or you?
Shoot.
If you're good, you're good. That's fine too. But I want to give you a minute if you got.
I want to say to everybody who is, because I know I'm not just talking to everybody on this table.
Yeah.
And I'm talking to people who will be saying, well, you don't know, and that's just you, and I don't have that platform, and making all these excuses. There has to be a moment where you stop making excuses, and you have to look at yourself and go, okay, if I got me here, I can get me out.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, it's the longevity of that took you to get here. It's like building a mountain, okay? Mm-hmm. And then when you reach a peak, and then the peak coming back down, you know, and the journey of that. We talk about it like it's a destination, and we get so hung up that we have to get there.
Yeah.
And then there are people who get so hung up that they have to get there. Either the destination or the process. They just defeat themselves. And all I can tell you is just what a mentor and friend of mine named Matt Jackson told me. He said, just make the next right choice.
Yeah.
And if you didn't devote yourself to living a life of health, as long as you just like for the next meal, makes the next right choice. If for the next hour that you're like, oh my gosh, I just want to go to McDonald's because I love McDonald's.
Yeah.
I love McDonald's hard. Okay. And just make the next right choice. If you got to say that and like scream it at yourself, but you need to take a stand.
Yep.
In the moment that you start saying, I am done. Yeah. Jesus said 4 words that like resonated with a lot of people. He said this, follow me. And then he said the thing that eventually got him crucified, I am. Mm-hmm. When you start saying the words, I am, you're talking to your identity. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you start saying, I am done being obese, that's why my name is the way it is.
Yeah.
Is because, and that's why I put periods in between each one, because I want you to say each word particularly. I am done being obese.
Yeah.
And if you're living with that lifestyle, I'd love for you to follow me, hit me up on the DMs, and like I'll get you if I can. Like you have permission to bombard me, and especially if you're in Omaha and the area, because I would love to throw some gasoline on the fire of change.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Nathan. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate your time and your inspiration to everyone out there. And if you're watching online or listening and you have any questions or concerns, you want to reach out to us on the podcast, you can do that. You can send us an email to podcast@cccomaha.org, or you can reach out to us on social media on Instagram or TikTok at CCCOMA Podcast. Or, you know, if you want to really get in there and let us hear your voice, call 402-885-9930 and leave us a voicemail. But until next time, we'll talk to you then.